Hi guys, I thought I'd shoot another video after a lot of the feedback I got last time really helped a lot of people. I felt like that was information that once upon a time that I really needed in my life, and because of that, I felt like I'd do another video, but with the disclaimer that I do not have a degree or a certification or anything when it comes to mental health. Sorry, I'm moving to feel more comfortable. These are just things that I have learned through the steps of going to counseling in general, or things that I have read. This does not, or things that have just helped me, but this doesn't mean that everything I say is the end all be all, or that what I say is just everything is true and everything outside of it is not true. I'm just saying that these are things that really helped me, and because of that, I'm just sharing them so that maybe it will help somebody else, and that is really my only goal. You can take what is good, throw out the rest, not listen to any of this. This is just for maybe some tips or things that I've learned along the way. And this one is a really hard video for me, especially because this is something that I would say that I struggle with on a daily basis. You know, a lot of people have different addictions, and I don't really have an addictive personality. I'm not somebody that's coffee addicted. You know, I've never been addicted to smoking or drinking or any of those things. I'm not really somebody that's gets obsessive with those kinds of things. But I would say if you could have an addiction to codependency, I have that one. And I think it's just from the brokenness of myself and what codependency does for that brokenness that I get attracted or put into situations where I become codependent. And the thing that I want to say about codependency before I go into anything else is that codependency is a two-way street. It's really hard to be codependent with somebody who's not codependent back. And so there's usually somebody with a stronger personality and somebody with a more passive personality. It's not always true, but that tends to be in my situation, that I have a more passive personality. I, by nature, love to help people, and so I am attracted to people that need a lot of help, and that is where codependency kind of shows up a lot, because if I'm not careful, I will start helping people out of those broken parts of me, and even those selfish needs that I feel like I am manipulating in that codependency. And I think that was one of the hardest things that I ever learned about myself, is that codependency is in some ways a form of manipulation, and I really didn't like that, because I didn't like thinking, oh, I'm a manipulative person, and in the sense of, do I go out of my way to manipulate people? Am I a liar? All these different things? No. But in codependency, where boundaries are crossed, there can be unconscious manipulations for you to feel okay by manipulating how other people feel or reacting, or so forth. So before I get started more, if you don't know what codependency is, I know that the definition, I looked it up, and I actually do have it here real quick. I'm just going to pull it up for you guys. It says codependency is excessive emotional or psychological reliance on a partner. So it's kind of, to me, I know this is a weird description. I've never in psychology ever heard someone describe it in this way. This is just how I see it. I see it as a DNA strand. It's twisted. And when you're codependent, it's kind of like this twisting of two people fusing together, and that is why it's so painful to stop being codependent, or if somebody decides to leave the codependent relationship, why it can be so is it feels like this unraveling of self. A lot of people describe codependency as you don't know where they begin and where you end. There is no boundary between you and the other person. And I think that codependency at the end of the day is just a form of having no boundaries. It's not saying no. It's not speaking up for yourself. It's not having emotions separate from somebody else. And the one thing that I think that I really want people to understand in this video, if nothing else, is codependency is not always a romantic relationship. I think it's like people always think that it's always romantic. It's always between, two people who love each other, whether they're in marriage or boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever it is. They always think that that is the only place for codependency to exist, and that is totally not true. You can be codependent on a friend. You can be codependent on your parents. You can be codependent on a coworker. You can be codependent on your boss. It doesn't matter if the relationship is romantic or not. It really could be, you could be codependent on a few people, but it tends to be between, one person and yourself, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be somebody that you're like in love with in that way. While that tends to be the greatest form of codependency, in my life, I feel like I've actually experienced it more with family members than in romantic relationships. And another thing about codependency, as I've read more about it, the real cure to codependency is boundaries. And I would love to do a whole video on just boundaries at some point, and what boundaries are, but it's kind of crosses over in codependency. Now, the thing that I've experienced that is so painful with codependency is when you start having this need of, to feel accepted, feel loved. It tends to be sometimes the core thing in codependency. And the thing is you start feeling what the other person feels emotionally. So if they're not happy, you can't be happy. If they're angry, you're angry. If they're sad, you're sad. And it's kind of like you don't know where your emotions, where you begin, where your autonomy is. And I think that is the part that gets very confusing in codependent relationships, is because you're having all these emotions, but they're actually not yours. And what you start to do is you start to try to manipulate the person's emotions. You might do it in other things, but you try to do it to manipulate their emotions. So if they're happy, then you can be happy. If they're at peace, you can be at peace. And the lie is that you can be happy if they're not happy. You can be at peace if they're not at peace. And I think that's why it can be so crushing in your life, and it can cause such a depression and anxiety because you're always worried about how that person is going to react. And that makes it tiring for you, because the thing is it's never pleasant when somebody is unhappy or angry or whatever it is. But it shouldn't be so controlling in your life that you're doing everything possible for that person to feel a certain way just so you can feel okay. And if you do feel that way, know that you shouldn't have shame with that. It's just really acknowledging that is something that's going on. And I think that it's just so important to identify that is codependency in your life, because you're not being the healthiest version of you. You could be so much more at peace and calm and happiness and joy and love and so much more in your life if that codependency relationship were to end. And it doesn't always mean that the relationship needs to entirely end. It just needs to function differently. And if it can't function differently, then the relationship does need to end. But it's really just about those boundaries and making sure that you're setting those boundaries and you're enforcing those boundaries. And that's the most important thing you can do for yourself. Now, I'm going to read a thing that I found that I thought was so important on healthy and unhealthy. So this is codependency. I must agree with you and you must agree with me. I think that's so true. I feel like there's like this feeling like we have to be on the same page. If you're in a codependent relationship, it is either you pushing down how you really feel to come to agreement or trying to manipulate them to agree with you. It's a persuasion of either yourself or them, because you feel like you must agree. And that is a complete lie as well. You can disagree and still love somebody. In fact, a lot of the times when you disagree with somebody, it has nothing to do with whether you love them or not. It's just your own personal opinion. It's your own self having an opinion. Also, I need you to feel okay, and you need me to feel okay. So again, it's this person making sure this person might be sad, this person might be angry, this person might just be stressed, but it's like you have this unrest in you until you can somehow make that person have a more peaceful or happy disposition, for you to feel okay. And the thing is it's never fun when someone you love is stressed out or all those things, but there's a difference between caring about them and feeling like your whole world is upside down if you can't get them to come to this place. They cannot feel okay and you can feel okay. It doesn't mean you're wrong or you're mean or you're cruel. It just means that, you're yourself and they're them. I must worry more about you than myself. I think this is huge. It's like you feel selfish if you start saying things that you need. You feel selfish if you say no. You feel selfish if you say, I can't do that right now. It's those boundaries that you start feeling selfish. You feel like a bad person if you say no, or I can't, or not right now, or maybe. Like even, I think halfway there is the, let me think about it, or maybe, instead of just always saying yes, 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 because it's okay to say no. And I know that is way easier to say than it is harder to implement. There's many times in my life that I'm like, how do you say no? The next thing is we lie to one another and pretend we're okay when we're not. So it's kind of like you take your own needs and throw them on the back burner. Keep throwing them on the back burner because you can't say you have a need, because you don't want that person to be upset. And that's also a problem because you do have needs, you do have wants, you do have dreams, you do have goals. And if you're in a relationship with somebody that is constantly making it like you can't have a need, and you constantly feel like you have to suppress those needs, then you really are in this unhealthy relationship. And then any hint of separation makes me feel insecure, unloved, unattracted, or alone. I don't always feel this way, but I have this need to be wanted, to be needed. And that I think that's just the part of me that likes to help people out, to serve people. And when I'm not wanted or needed, I'm kind of like, well, then what do I do? And I think that that's so important to realize is that you can be loved and not be needed. And I think that was a huge realization to me. So I just want to say, like, one healthy boundary that I'll just throw in here that I read in a book, is an unhealthy boundary would be saying, if someone's yelling at you, you need to stop yelling because you're upsetting me and I don't like that you're yelling. The thing is you're still trying to control them. You're still trying to make sure that they're not angry. The correct boundary would say, you can keep yelling, but I am not going to stay in the room and take you yelling. So that is more the healthy boundary because you can only control you. You can't control anybody else, their actions, their emotions. And that was so profound for me because I feel like I kept trying to tell people, like, stop treating me this way, or stop doing this, or stop doing that, or speaking this way, or stop feeling that way. And it's like, I can't control them. It's not right for me to say that, but there's nothing wrong with me saying, but I will remove myself from the situation. I will remove myself from the room. I will not put up with that. So this is the consequence of you continuing to do what you do, but not telling you you have to stop doing that. It's just, this is what I'm going to do if you're going to continue to do that. And I think that is huge, because I feel like our boundaries, we think we're telling people our boundaries by being like, well, you need to stop yelling because you're hurting my feelings, instead of, you can continue to yell, but I'm not going to stay in the room if you're going to do so unless you would like. And it's kind of like that person will know, well, that's the consequence. If they keep yelling, you're leaving the room. And obviously not manipulating that person into being like, it's completely different if you're like in an argument, you're just trying to run away. But anyways, a great description of why boundaries are also important in codependency is, I heard that someone said once, I believe they got this from a book, I'm not quoting anybody, but for a train track to move forward, it needs tracks. And within those boundaries, it can move forward. So boundaries are not an evil or bad thing. Boundaries, the train couldn't keep moving if it didn't have any of the boundaries. It would be all over the place. To move forward, it needs the boundaries of the track. So there's nothing wrong with setting those boundaries. And that's really one of the key elements into healing in codependency and not becoming codependent on just somebody else. Because I think as a codependent, you will just jump from one codependent relationship to another until you really, I think, identify what it is that you want, what you need, who you are outside of anybody else. And also expressing those needs and surrounding yourself with people who love you, who are not going to be codependent on you, but love you and have boundaries of themselves, of who you are, and not crossing those boundaries. I think the thing is we also think that as a codependent that we never cross other people's boundaries, that somehow the other person in the relationship is crossing ours. But by trying to manipulate their emotions, we are crossing their boundaries, because they are, as much as us, allowed to be angry or sad or frustrated. And so we have this belief that we're always the victim, but honestly, sometimes we are just as much, doing it back to them, and they're allowing it themselves sometimes. But I think it's important to identify those relationships around you, and are they healthy? And if they're not unhealthy, doesn't mean that they have to be out of your life. It just means that you need to start taking small steps to identify your wants, your needs, and ways to love yourself, and then realize that you can set boundaries. Because the thing is if you set boundaries, you are doing the most loving thing for yourself and for them, because that person is sick too. And you just as much as you don't want to be sick, you don't want them to be sick. And the thing is selfish on both of your parts to keep being in this codependent relationship. And I could go on, and if you have any more questions or resources about codependency, I've heard of a lot of good books. I know of a lot of great quotes. But I think the most important thing is, if you are somebody that tends to be codependent, you might deal with a lot of anxiety. And the reason why I bring that up is someone that has dealt with a lot of anxiety. A lot of it came from codependency, or does come from codependency, and not setting those boundaries. So, if you would like those resources, I'd love to give them to you. I think it's important to realize the difference between helping and being codependent. Are you doing it because you want to help, or are you doing it because you feel obligated to help? And I think that I could go on, and if you would like me to make another video going into the relationship of codependency in a love relationship versus a family relationship versus a friend relationship, I'd love to do that, because I feel like I've had experience in all of those relationships. Because I would say that other than being a people pleaser, codependency, is one place I feel like I have a lot of expertise. So I just one note: if you are a people pleaser, being codependent is highly likely for you. But anyways, if if you got anything out of this video, I'd love for you to tell me that. If you want any more resources, like I said before, just let me know. And again, if you got nothing out of this video, then great for you, and I just totally made it for myself. And I just thank you so much for watching the last video and this video, and if this just helps one person, that is really just my biggest intent, is I really needed this information for myself at times. And, if you really want more healing with codependency, again, I recommend going to counseling, because I don't know it all. This is just my experiences. So if you have any prayer requests, comment down below, message me personally. I'm always here. I love you guys, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.